Hello, and welcome to this interview with Samar Hussaini, one of our artists presently on display at Alpha Art Gallery's current exhibition, Mirror to the World. My name is Katie Perrin, and together we will be going over some of Hussaini's artistic process, as well as the pieces that were graciously contributed to both our physical and online presentations. We're going to start off pretty simple. Samar, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, we're so excited to get the chance to talk to you today and learn more about your art. And first, I want to start by hearing a little bit about you. So, tell us where you're from, where you're living right now, and how did you initially get into art and begin your career as an artist?
Well, so I grew up outside of Washington, D.C., and I was there because my father was an activist in the 1970s. So he moved into the D.C. area to play a little bit of a role in the political arena. And then I moved to New York City to get my master's at Pratt, and I ended up staying and working for several years in advertising. And when I had kids, we ended up moving to New Jersey, and that's actually where I live and work right now. So we ended up converting my attic into a studio space. So I'm able to actually work upstairs in a really fairly large studio. But beyond that, I started my career in design and advertising, and I worked for several design agencies in New York, and mainly doing online marketing campaigns for clients like American Express and a lot of pharma clients as well. So I've always been really curious about art and really the ability to express yourself creatively. When I was little, my mom took me to a lot of art museums as a child. And so I think it really influenced my love of arts. So, with my design background and my online marketing and branding, I thought it was a really easy transition to start my career as an artist. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think you can definitely see that background in graphic design and marketing come out in your art as well. And to pivot to talking about the mixed media works in the show, what is the inspiration behind the selection of your multimedia works on display?
Uh, well, the work I selected for the exhibit was really inspired by sharing the positive Palestinian perspective, and really sharing that narrative and the challenges of people who are driven to self-determination, and also that pursuit of hope for a better future despite all of the hardship and adversity and discrimination. I thought it was perfect examples for Mirror to the World.
Yes, and to talk more about that media that you use, or like the diverse array of media that you work with, why do you choose to work with different artistic media, and how does creating multimedia art relate to your overall aesthetic practice and the messaging in your work?
Well, I really choose to work in different mediums because I find that creating all of those layers, it has a wonderful textured effect. And it also creates a visual effect of dimensionality and really draws the viewer in closer. I want people to experience the work as an overall. So when you see a piece, you enjoy it, but then when you get closer, you see really the texture and the visual harmony, and it pulls you in and it gets you to want to explore it up close. And really, it's about taking the time, the moments to enjoy that piece, breathing through the moment and examining things that you wouldn't normally notice. And I think it also relates to the messaging of looking past that initial view and taking the time to understand the specifics and to enjoy all those little details and creating a conversation around that as well.
Definitely. And something we touched on a little earlier about your background, I want to talk about in more depth. I see that you earned a bachelor's in studio art and art history and a computer graphics certificate from the Corcoran School of Art in DC, as well as a master's in communication and digital design from the Pratt Institute. How do you think that your educational background in graphic design and digital art manifests itself in your contemporary artistic practice? And what are some approaches behind that practice?
I think that's a really great question, because I think a lot of times as artists, we don't think about how any of our past careers help us to being an artist. But I think of my design and online marketing as playing a really strong role in my work, and that experience of understanding design and exploring the play of visual content to draw the viewer in, it really was part of my advertising and also fine art exploration. So having a successful career in advertising, really learning how to talk to clients, how to brand myself, and my fine art, it's really important to my creative practice, and it gives me the confidence in myself and also my work. And again, like a lot of artists, we forget how to talk to people because we think, oh, our art should talk for itself. But I just love interacting with people and learning what their experience is with my work, because each of us brings our own narrative and experiences. And so seeing how those references weave into the experience of viewing my own work is really a pleasure for me. And when people ask me usually about, they come up and they say, oh, well, tell me about your artwork. And I always say to them, well, what do you think? Because I like to hear their perspective first. I find it so much more enlightening to hear what they think, and then for me to explain to them what the work is about. So it becomes a really engaging experience as well.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely something you can pick up on in your work, like the dialogue between like viewer and like artist, you. And in your artist statement, you discuss how you repurpose traditional elements, symbols, and motifs of Arab culture in a modern way to create art that is a record of your Arab identity and to tell the positive narrative of Arab identity and heritage in the face of adversity. And in light of that, how do your works in Mirror to the World convey this message? And what are some central themes and subject matters that you explore?
Well, my work is, as you said, it's about portraying a positive view about being an Arab, a Palestinian American, because many times the subject has been very unapproachable. And so through my art, it becomes a much easier thing to be able to talk about and discuss. And so it's really you creating a dialogue, and most of the time it's a positive dialogue through the art. So I really feel like art, it allows for people to hear different perspectives and understand as well. And, as a child, of parents who are Palestinian, and both of them were born in Jerusalem, telling that narrative about how my father, he was forced to leave and he became a refugee in 1948 at the age of 8 years old, and my mother experiencing her challenges of living under occupation in Jerusalem, and really trying to convey the message of them never giving up and continuing to persevere. And it really embodies the experience of the tragedy of losing one's ancestral home and the way of life that's passed down from generation to generation. So really the art is about humanizing Palestinians, and then so that others can identify as well, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting and ties into a lot of your pieces. And I want to talk about 3 pieces I'm really intrigued by, entitled Her Endurance Prevailed, Their Courage is Boundless, and She is Determined. What is your motivation behind creating and naming these pieces, and what story do these works tell?
These are some of my favorite pieces, actually, and they were completed this year, and they really are a reinterpretation of a Palestinian dress. In Arabic, it's called a tob, and it's designed with tatriz, which is a traditional cross-stitch embroidered design, and it appears on the chest of the dress as well as the sleeves and the hem of the dress, and it indicates a regional identity. And because each dress is meticulously designed by the women and created by them, it really is a celebration of where they come from and their lives. And it also, to me, symbolizes the years of history that's rooted in the land and the culture. And so the dress series that I created was really meant to be inspired by the culture and that socio-political awareness, and then creating a dialogue also about living under occupation and about those that are also in exile. So I wanted to specifically represent in the pieces because when you see them, they are three-dimensional. And I wanted it to represent that absence of the human form and then reflect on the identity and again, asking that question that without a country or a homeland, how does one's cultural identity survive? So for me, the dresses express the beauty of the culture, and it dates back centuries, and also the resilience of people to carry on despite their difficulty and suffering. And it's also about preserving the practice of the embroidery that's passed down from mother to daughter. So it's reinterpreting those traditions as well to the present day. And then I gave the names of the titles. She Refuses to Be Held Back, and because I wanted to give a homage to the culture, the women, the people, and their strength and the beauty and how it prevails.
Yes, and I think that message of resilience is definitely carried forth through these pieces. And now I want to talk a little bit about the media you use and in your work in general and in these pieces in particular. You use acrylic, graphic, ink, thread, and image transferred onto raw canvas. How does the overall three-dimensionality and layered quality of these pieces play into their overall meaning?
Well, to me, it's really about the texture and creating layers and creating details with the different types of medium. And it's those details that will draw the people in and then start to wonder as they get closer to it, oh, there's gold thread, and what is the symbolism of the thread being stitched in there? Is there something that's stitched in there? The use of the acrylic that almost creates a watercolor effect, creating layers. And so, what does that mean for the identity of the person, of the layers that go into it? So.
Yeah, no, that's great. And this show showcases like multimedia work as well as watercolor work. So these pieces are perfect and really suited to the exhibition. And to talk about one of the other pieces you have on display, your colorful multimedia work, Thread Us Together, what is the motivation and symbolism behind the abstract motifs you chose to depict?
So as I said before, I use a lot of embroidery because it's part of the Palestinian culture, the tatriz, and specifically those image transfers are embroidery that's passed down from my grandmother to my mother and to me, and then also other women in my family who have passed on the embroidery. One thing is that my aunt, who is her name was Hussaini. She gifted actually several dresses to my mother as wedding gifts. So she was really an amazing woman of her time. And in 1948, she established a school for Palestinian orphans in Jerusalem called Dar Tifel. and that means home of children. So she was really dedicated to women's issues, establishing a college for women and serving in the Arab Women's Union. And I really wanted all of that to intertwine with multimedia layers so that it anchors my own personal narrative and then reveals culture and socio-political awareness of Arab culture and people.
That's great. And now I want to talk about like one of my personal favorite pieces, your piece, Beloved Memory. I really love the interplay of different colors and textures in this piece and would love to know the inspiration and story behind it. So what do you intend to convey through this piece, and what is the symbolic significance of its symbols?
Well, so I use tetris, as I said, from pieces that are passed down from my grandmother to my mother, and then it symbolizes to me the history. So I also created these geometric stencils to symbolize a Mediterranean feel, and I stitched onto the canvas to create a feeling of things being stitched together. And I also explore the painting on raw canvas because I wanted to give the feeling of an aged look. And I also really loved the way that acrylic interacted with the raw canvas and creating a very watercolor effect to it as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really great. And what is the significance in your general practice behind your choice to experiment with abstraction?
Well, I think being able to create abstract pieces of art, it really allows me to create tension and movement and contrast, and to tell a narrative that's specific to a feeling as well. So I think that approach, it really can transform the way we see the world, because it allows the viewer to identify the work not based and not based on their own narrative. And so for me, it's about really deconstructing the emotion and then rebuilding it into an abstract form.
And of all your works, which is your favorite, or which do you have a particular attachment to? If you don't have one, what piece would you want to talk about in a little bit more detail?
Okay, thanks. So the dresses are really some of my favorite pieces because they feel like they're alive and they're full of energy. And originally they were meant to take on a feel of preservation of culture that could have been extinct. But they've taken on a different meaning for me now. It's about preservation and appreciation of history and culture. And I've also taken on portraits and incorporating a lot of my abstract backgrounds to exaggerate movement and characteristics. In the process of creating, these pieces are meant to be a process of creating an homage to women activists. So I'm really excited, hopefully, to be able to share that with everybody as well.
Thank you, Summer. I don't have any more questions. However, if there's anything else you'd like to add that you might have thought of during our interview, anything you're working on, any shows you're going to be in soon, feel free to share.
Well, I think as an artist, we're always working on things, and that's a wonderful thing, to be able to grow, and hopefully I will be growing. As I said, I'll be doing these portrait series, which I'm really excited about. I also do wearable art because, and that's about the idea of taking art that instead of it being on a wall, you can actually move around with it. You can share it with other people. So I have caftans, I have scarves, I have purses. And all of that you can see on my website at samardesigns.com, which is SAMAR designs.com. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, that's really where I show my process, which I think is also really great because as an artist, a lot of times artists covet the process, but I love the idea of sharing my process because not only for myself as an artist to grow, but I think for people to see that as well is really important. And that's my Instagram is Samar Designs and Art. So I hope that you will check it out.
Yeah, thank you. Well, once again, thank you so much for speaking with us today and sharing insight into your creations.
Oh, thank you. It's such a pleasure and so nice to meet you and be a part of this wonderful exhibit. You know, it's just really great. I'm really appreciative.
On behalf of Alpha Art Gallery, I would like to take a minute to thank our sponsors, including Amboy Bank, Magyar Bank, Johnson & Johnson, New Brunswick City Center, Middlesex County Cultural and Heritage Commission, Bristol Myers Squibb, and Pfizer Inc. Alpha Art is confident that all who come to our 2021 shows will leave with a greater appreciation of the arts and the gallery showcasing of a variety of artists.